Recording now. Give it a few moments. All right. Good evening, brethren. Welcome to September 24th edition of the Thursday Night Educational Series. As we've talked before in these sessions, this is not tiled, so please govern yourselves accordingly. I did just start the recording up. Please keep yourself muted during the presentation. Any questions that you want to send via chat, or we'll cover them at the end. We'll also open the mic after we hit the wrap-up part. And there will be a survey that is sent out, so please be sure to take that at some point here in the next couple days. Next. As you heard, we had some changes around in schedule. So Brother Hans will be up about the third eye. Brother Bill will be again here about Epoch, and we will be doing the Minneapolis Valley introduction for the candidates by the Lodge of Perfection on the 15th. Oops, too far. And with no further ado, Brother Bill, you please go ahead and do your share.
All righty.
Make sure you remember to click the sound so we get that later. So.
So do you click it over to the presentation?
No, you do.
Okay, so I got to get onto this thing. All righty. So being a master procrastinator and given short notice, it will explain some of the potential glitches, but we're going to discuss the Book of the Dead. This has a whole lot of history, and it ends up in Hollywood media and a lot of other things that usually misrepresent it.
I'm going to presume since...
Everybody hear me okay?
We can hear you, but you're not presenting anything.
Okay, so you're not seeing the show?
No, you haven't done any presentation yet. You need to share?
Okay, let me go back to where it says share. I'll hit escape. Like I say, we're having glitches here.
You have to hit the blue button, share.
Yeah, I don't have a blue button right now. That's my problem.
So exit your presentation.
And let's see, we had this going before.
Yes, you're
Okay.
good.
All right, so like I said, there'll be some glitches. So there are a lot of facts about the Book of the Dead that people don't fully appreciate. When the first idea of the Book of the Dead was found, came forth in hieroglyphics. And actually, it was mistranslated for a long time, and one of the appropriate translations would be the Book of Coming Forth by Day. So most importantly, the Book of the Dead is actually not a book. It's a collection of ancient Egyptian funerary texts rather than an actual book. It was created around the beginning of Egypt's New Kingdom, so it's over 1,000 years ago, and has been written by a succession of priests during this period of time. Okay, now it's glitching. Actively used up to 50 years before the current era, so it was used for quite a period of time. It addressed the needs of spirits during their journey through the afterlife, and gave them a series of information that they would need after they passed. The text contained magical spells, incantations, mystical formulas, prayers, and hymns. It was never standardized, so although there are quite a few of the books of the dead that have been found in various places, no two of them are the same. There are roughly 200 copies that are currently known to exist, although depending on the author that you read, they go up to like 1,000, so it's not a hard number. Most important sections describe the weighing of the heart rate, which we'll describe later, and that's the one most people are familiar with. The text evolved over time and became democratized over time, and we'll discuss that as well. So having a Book of the Dead in one's tomb would be the equivalent of a student in modern day getting their hands on the test answers to everything they would ever need throughout school. Let's see. So when pardon me? So when we look at the discovery, translation, interpretation, and preservation of the books, was known in the Middle Ages, but not understood. When they first came across the hieroglyphics in the tombs, they thought, well, this is probably the equivalent of the Bible to the Egyptians, but they didn't really understand the purpose. So it's found in tombs. A lot of misbelief. Was it like the Bible or the Quran? But it was translated in 1842, and that introduced a numbering system to more carefully understand the various texts. So Carl Richard Lepsius was the first to actually transcribe it from the hieroglyphics and start putting a system to it. You know, the problem with the hieroglyphics is there was no good way to reproduce these very long texts. So they had to be done by pictures or drawings. They couldn't, you know, simply photocopy them or do it an easy way. So there's a lot of differences in how these texts have been interpreted. So initially, there was 165 different spells identified by Lepsius, but subsequently it was expanded by Edouard Novel in 1886, and he came up with about a 3-volume text that further tried to number and identify these various spells, and he expanded over time to about 192. So there's a chronology to how these books evolved. So early on in 3150 before current era was the first preserved hieroglyphs in tombs in Abydos. About 150 years later, there was a beginning of numbered dynasties of ancient kings. They had the first dynasty, the second dynasty, and so on. And that's part of what's confusing is they refer to these eras in different terms. Some are dynasties, some are determined in other ways. So in 2345 before current era, the first royal pyramid of King Yunus, they found the pyramid texts. So these were texts that were found in the pyramids and look like the drawing just to the right there. They tended to be hieroglyphics, they tended to be vertical texts, and they were drawn. And interestingly, some of the figures were deliberately not completed. And part of the concept is that they weren't completed so that the demons being pictured wouldn't be able to harm the pharaohs. In 2100 before current era, they found the first texts in coffins. So the box down below in the lower right is actually a coffin. So instead of having to be in the tombs, they actually started appearing in higher priests and others, not just pharaohs, and carved within their coffins. So in 1600, we began seeing spells. So the first spells, but prior to this was just kind of, you know, this is the map to get through, but the spells to how to get through it was found in the coffin of Queen Mentuhotep. I think that's right, Mentuhotep. About 1550 before current era, papyrus copies emerged. So instead of being in the wood of coffins or on the lids or in the tombs, they started being written on papyrus. And about 600 before current era, the order of spells became more standardized. So the texts weren't the same, but they had sort of the same order of what was done. Okay. The 2nd century before current era, possibly the last copies of the Book of the Dead were produced. So these are produced by scribes and priests, and they tended to be individualized for different people, depending on their ability to pay for these texts. So this gives you an idea of some of the periods. So Nile culture begins actually 3,900 years ago, before the current era. And then you go through the Archaic, the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom, late period, Greek, Ptolemaic era, in the Roman period, you know, moving forward. And as time evolved, the Egyptians changed the way they viewed dying. From early on, it was felt that only the pharaohs had access to heaven because they're trying to get back to their divine heritage. And later it became, as it became democratized, it became, okay, well, maybe well-to-do people could do it, and then people could get Book of the Dead inscribed depending on how much money they had and how many spells they could afford to get. So it brings us to the Hall of Justice, or also called the Hall of Two Truths, which is, you know, we refer to in some of our Masonic rites, and I won't go into that. Egyptians believed aspects of a man's ka, or his double, could be seen in the material world. So for example, man's shadow was felt to be actually part of him, not just a shadow. And also reflection in a mirror was felt to be something that actually was important. And this has interesting reflections in various cultures around the world. So at one point in Egypt, if you were going to have a certain kind of meeting where you wanted to be private and not have your Ka shadow, the shadow, deceive you, you would do it at high noon, because at high noon the sun would be directly overhead and you're less likely to cast a shadow, and so your Ka was hidden. Similarly, reflections in mirrors or reflections taken in cameras, if you go to Central America and via some of the Mayans, they're very sensitive not to let you take a picture because they view that you're stealing part of their Ka. They call it something else, I'm not sure what, but you're stealing from them because the image is important. So there are multiple deities that are present in the Hall of Justice, or the Hall of Two Truths. And this is worth going back to because you can't remember the first go around. So one was Osiris, which is the Lord and Judge of the dead. We have Atum, who is called the Father of Souls. We have Ma, or Ma'at, who is the goddess of truth and justice. We have Troth, who is the scribe of the gods. We have Anubis, who is conductor of souls. He was the son of Osiris by his sister Nephthys. And Horus was the son of Osiris, who presents the deceased to his father for judgment in the Hall of Justice. Isis, the wife and sister of Osiris and mother of Horus. And Nephthys, the sister of Isis and Osiris, mother of Anubis and Osiris. In some of our Masonic books, they have a list of these things. It's easier to keep track of it. And it's interesting if you go back in history, if you go back with the story of Adam and Eve, obviously incest was the only option to reproduce a species. So there was a lot of that. And then as you got into the pharaohs, they were spelled to be deities, so they couldn't have kids with the normal people in the population. So that's why you have a lot of this kind of inbreeding. So there are also the four sons of Horus, and the first one I'm going to slaughter. Kepsenuf, Dumutaf, Hapi, and Imsati. So one of the most common spells that seems to occur in almost all of the books of the dead was spell 125. And it had two parts to it. First, there was a positive affirmation. So in going to the Hall of Truth, you would say what's good about you. Well, I obeyed the law. I paid my taxes. I went to my place of worship. I was felt to be a good person by everybody. And so you'd kind of try to sell yourself. But then you had to go through the hall and go through multiple judges who would ask for a negative confession. So no, I didn't covet my neighbor's wife. I never made anybody cry, and negative confessions. So in this picture, we have a picture of, on the left, of Anubis, and he presents the newly deceased to Osiris, and in his left hand is a symbol of eternal life, an Ankh, A-N-K-E. In the next picture by the scale, he is actually adjusting the scale, so that the scale on the left has a, you guys able to see when I do a pointer or not? On the left, you're able to see his heart, and on the right, you're able to see a feather. And so they initially adjust the scale so that they're equal. And then as they go through the judgment, they decide if the heart remains lighter than a feather or not. And if not, the creature just to the right of the scale is Amit. He has the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. And if the deceased is viewed unethical, he will consume the heart, and the deceased ceases to exist in any form or spirit whatsoever. On the far right is Thor, the scribe. And what's interesting is that his arm is very outstretched, straight out, because he's taking this very seriously and making sure that all the documentation is correct. Of note, he does this for each person that comes in, and there is felt that he may have been the inventor of hieroglyphics, because that's how he was taking the notes. So in the papyrus of Ani, which is one of the documents they found spell 30b, which is interesting because the spell is for not letting Ani's heart create opposition against him in God's domain. So one of the interesting concepts of going before the gods was that, in theory, they wanted you to be perfect, but in fact, nobody was. And so one of the other things they would do is have a scarab that was inscribed with information to keep your heart from testifying against you. So you could get away with saying, no, I didn't do those things. I'm a good guy. So one of the best documents they found was the last judgment of Hunefer. Sometimes it's spelled without the hyphen. And this is found to be about a 60-foot long papyrus that had all kinds of spells. And Hunefer was a scribe, so actually he was kind of in on the deal because he had written a lot of these details, and he was well-to-do, so he could get a very special papyrus done. So let's see. So he's right here, and he'll be throughout this papyrus, clothed in white. So here he is being guided first by Anubis, and then Anubis goes and adjusts the scale, as we commented, so that his heart equals the weight of the feather. Up here, we again have Hunefer, and he's now trying to deal with the 42 judges that have 42 questions that he has to answer negatively to affirm that he hasn't done these things. And part of the trick of getting through to the afterworld is that Hunefer is supposed to know the name of each of the judge and what it is that they judge him on. And when he's successful, they will say, you know us, pass by us, and he could continue. So he had to get through that step. And then he's finally getting presented to Osiris. Osiris is sitting on the throne to the right. So Osiris is the god of Duat, the underworld, and decides whether or not he gets to ascend to what they view as the eternal bliss of their afterlife. Just above Osiris, there is a flying eagle with an eye, and that's Horus again. And Horus is carrying in his talons, a little hard to see in this diagram, but he's carrying a feather, which is a symbol for eternity. And again, Osiris has another one of the Anke items, a symbol of eternal life. In back of Osiris are some of the other family members. It's Isis, his wife, and Nephthys, who is Isis' sister and mother of Anubis. In front of Osiris, you see 4 individuals, and the 4 individuals are the children of Horus, and they recommend the 4 cardinal points: north, east, west, and south. Down below, the white platform that she is on is significant for being the kind of salt that was in plains around Egypt that they used to embalm and preserve the dead. The other thing that the 4 children of Horus did is they were charged with preserving all the organs of the deceased in canoptic jars. So it was very important for them to preserve eternity for each of the judged individuals. So the Egyptian Book of the Dead, this is a coffin fragment. And again, this is in hieroglyphics because it's vertical. And this is between 747 and 656 before current era. It contains spell 79, which is addressing attaching soul to the body, and spell 80, which is preventing incoherent speech, which obviously I would like to use that one tonight, but I do what I can do. In the Seti period, which was now in the 26th dynasty, there started to be a defined order to how the various scrolls were produced for the Book of the Dead. So there were a series of chapters. So chapters 1 to 16, deceased enters the tomb and descends the underworld and regains power of movement and speech. Chapters 17 to 63 is explanation of the mythic origin of the gods and places, and the deceased is allowed to live again so he may arise reborn with the morning sun. In chapters 64 to 129, the deceased travels across the sky in the sun arc as one of the blessed in the evening, but then descends down into the underworld to appear before Osiris. And then in chapters 130 to 189, having been vindicated in the trial with Osiris, the deceased assumes power in the universe and becomes one of the gods, and also includes assorted chapters on protective amulets and provision of where to be in important places. So this is the one I'm not sure it's going to work. We'll give it a try and see if we got sound. So I found this, and it's actually from a TED Talk, and it's a great summary of the whole idea of the Book of the Dead. So let me know if you hear it, and if not, I'll try to tell you about it.
Ani stands before a large golden scale where the jackal-headed god Anubis is weighing his heart against a pure ostrich feather. Ani was a real person, a scribe from the Egyptian city of Thebes who lived in the 13th century BCE. And depicted here is a scene from his Book of the Dead, a 78-foot papyrus scroll designed to help him attain immortality. Such funerary texts were originally written only for pharaohs, but with time, the Egyptians came to believe regular people could also reach the afterlife if they succeeded in the passage. Ani's epic journey begins with his death. His body is mummified by a team of priests who remove every organ except the heart, the seat of emotion, memory, and intelligence. It's then stuffed with a salt called natron and wrapped in resin-soaked linen. In addition, the wrappings are woven with charms for protection and topped with a heart scarab amulet that will prove important later on. The goal of the 2-month process is to preserve Ani's body as an ideal form with which his spirit can eventually reunite. But first, that spirit must pass through the Duat, or underworld. This is a realm of vast caverns, lakes of fire, and magical gates, all guarded by fearsome beasts. Snakes, crocodiles, and half-human monstrosities with names like He Who Dances in Blood. To make things worse, Apep, the serpent god of destruction, lurks in the shadows, waiting to swallow Ani's soul. Fortunately, Ani is prepared with the magic contained within his Book of the Dead. Like other Egyptians who could afford it, Ani customized his scroll to include the particular spells, prayers, and codes he thought his spirit might need. Equipped with this arsenal, our hero traverses the obstacles, repels the monster's attacks, and stealthily avoids Apep to reach the hall of Ma'at, goddess of truth and justice. Here, Ani faces his final challenge. He is judged by 42 assessor gods, who must be convinced that he has lived a righteous life. Ani approaches each one, addressing them by name and declaring a sin he has not committed. Among these negative confessions, or declarations of innocence, he proclaims that he has not made anyone cry, is not an eavesdropper, and has not polluted the water. But did Ani really live such a perfect life? Not quite, but that's where the heart scarab amulet comes in. It's inscribed with the words, "Do not stand as a witness against me," precisely so Ani's heart doesn't betray him by recalling the time he listened to his neighbor's fight or washed his feet in the Nile. Now it's Ani's moment of truth, the weighing of the heart. If his heart is heavier than the feather, weighed down by Ani's wrongdoings, it'll be devoured by the monstrous Ammit, part crocodile, part leopard, part hippopotamus, and Ani will cease to exist forever. But Ani is in luck. His heart is judged pure. Ra, the sun god, takes him to Osiris, god of the underworld, who gives him final approval to enter the afterlife. In the endless and lush field of reeds, Ani meets his deceased parents. Here there is no sadness, pain, or anger, but there is work to be done. Like everyone else, Ani must cultivate a plot of land, which he does with the help of a Shabti doll that had been placed in his tomb. Today, the papyrus of Ani resides in the British Museum, where it has been since 1888. Only Ani, if anyone, knows what really happened after his death. But thanks to his Book of the Dead, we can imagine him happily tending his crops for all eternity.
So if you want further reading, you can download this list of references, which is pretty good. And I had, kind of some, because I did this at the last minute, some breaking research that just came to light today. The last minute research, but I haven't verified it yet. Little known historical fact, pharaohs were buried with their arms crossed because they believed that there would be a countless water slides in their afterlife. And with that, I'll open it for questions.
Wait, what was that last part?
Because they believed there would be countless water slides in the afterlife.
Well, okay, we'll buy that as one interpretation. That's pretty good.
Yeah, like I said, I haven't verified it yet. It was last minute.
Hey, Bill, this is Gene. Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. A couple of comments and a question. As we were going through it, I realized, or it seems like, it seems like the purpose of the Book of the Dead was kind of how to almost cheat your way into the immortality rather than, getting there truthfully, because when it talked about a scarab being placed over the heart, that would shield you from you lying and your heart betraying the truth. So that was very interesting and eye-opening. So, but so what happened to the individuals that could not? I mean, so this was essentially the path. The Book of the Dead would show you how to get to a Christian equivalent of heaven, let's say. So what was the equivalent of hell? What happened to the common folk, or what happened to the individual who got stuck through those trials?
Well, I think, the whole idea is different than a Christian idea. Because there is no hell. You either make it or you don't. And if Amit eats your heart, or one of the he who dances in blood and the other soul-sucking creatures on the way gets you, basically you cease to exist. You don't get to go forward. And this is obviously different than other religions. There's a sense that you could definitely game the system, which was the idea, because this became a pretty good gig for the priests that were writing the scripts. So they became kind of like buying customized text with your name on it and doing it on the internet. So it was part of the commerce. But the other thing that's kind of interesting is the idea of the field of reeds is that it brings you back to who you were before. So I don't know if you caught that whole deal where they say, well, your parents are there, and even your favorite pets are there, and your home is there, and all the things you loved in life. Well, if you lived in a slovenly, poverty-stricken thing, it probably wouldn't be such a great deal to get that as your reward. So it's kind of, this came forward because it was the pharaohs had a pretty good deal, and the richest people that were getting this, they didn't really work on, okay, what happens to the poor suckers, because they weren't buying the book. I think
very good. There's some other in one of the interpretations we hear in the Scottish Rite is that the soul is condemned to the bodies of animals until it is purged of its imperfections, and then I guess I really don't know if it's tried again, or after a period of time since it's been purged, it's been readmitted. But that is an interpretation that those who have seen our 31st degree get a chance to understand for themselves without, as they say, disclosing anything else.
Well, remember the book evolved over 1,000 years. And it evolved from the pharaohs just having the deal, and they were always going to have a good deal because they were trying to get back to their divine linkage was their goal to do it, and then it slowly evolved to common folk could get it, and with the over 200 different interpretations, obviously there could be one such as in the 31st degree. But I think one of the interesting things is there's this has often been also compared to the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead was read to people before they died. And the Book of the Dead that the Egyptian had was for people after they died, but it also gave kind of some solace to the surviving family that there was a plan in place for the afterlife. But obviously over 1,000 years, there were a lot of interpretations, and it would make sense that some of them as well, you just don't cease to exist. You got something else going on. So again, it depends which book you open up.
Well, thank you, Brother Bill, for the presentation. I have posted the survey link into the chat. You'll also get a copy of that via email. You don't have to do them twice. It's just giving a couple options to take the survey. As I said in the beginning, we have a couple more presentations left. The Third Eye from Brother Hanson, Enoch, my Brother Bill again, and the Lodge of Perfection will start the introduction to the Minneapolis Valley for our upcoming reunion degrees on the 15th of October, or 15th of October. With that, that is the end of the presentation for this evening. I will give this a end of the, sorry, there it is. Stop and stop the record.
Thank you all for